Welcome into the Inside Scoop. Your eyes do not deceive you. I'm not Josh Newberg. In fact, I'm JD Piquel filling in for Josh Newberg, but it's a pleasure to be back on the On3 Recruits channel. My first time since National Signing Day. I'll tell you what, man, we have got a loaded show for you here today. David Sanders gave his pledge to the Tennessee Vols to break it all down. Josh Newberg actually sat down with Austin Price to unpack what that means for Tennessee going forward. Florida, they picked up a big commitment from Ben Hanks over the past week. That was massive for them, landing a legacy commit at the cornerback position. Talked to Keith Niebuhr from Gators Online to get the latest and greatest there. And then to round it out for you, here we got Josh McCuistion from the Sooner Scoop, as they are eyeing potentially trying to land the services of five-star offensive tackle Michael Fasusi. Make sure you're subscribed right here to the On3 Recruits channel. In addition to that now, if you want to get a little bit extra, like hey, I like watching the videos. That's all great. I appreciate what y'all do. However, I want to kick it up a notch as we move into the college football season. Use code JD1 for $1. You get 1 month of access to all of the best content we have over at on3.com. All right, so if you're a Tennessee fan, you want to read more about David Sanders giving his commitment to the Vols, VolQuest, $1 using JD1 at checkout, 1 month. It's yours. All right, so lock in right here. Got a great show on deck for you. Here is Josh's conversation with Austin Price as David Sanders is committed to Tennessee.
The Tennessee Volunteers landed number one offensive tackle David Sanders over the weekend, and things are looking up in Knoxville. But the Volunteers, you better believe it, they are looking for more. What does this recruiting class still need before pen hits paper in December? I got Tennessee recruiting insider Austin Price on this video. We're going to talk all about it. But first, Tennessee fans, jump on board, hit subscribe to the On3 Recruits page. We love talking Tennessee recruiting. We want you to be a part of it. Go ahead, jump on board, hit subscribe. All right, let's bring in Austin Price. 22 commitments on that Vols commitment list right now, surging towards the top 5 class. First, we're going to talk about what's left to accomplish. What's left to accomplish on the offensive line before we get to more of a general picture?
Well, on the offensive line, I think they're pretty much done. I think that they're done with the commitment of David Sanders on Saturday. I think that one rounds out a nice, really group. You've got the one tackle with Sanders and then 3 interior guys that I really like a lot. So with Utu, Ogamoro, and then Nick Moore, the center from Jefferson County. So Tennessee has done a really nice job. You look at, I think it's 3 4-stars and a 5-star on the offensive line. Nice job by Glenn Ellerby, Kevin Pendleton, the entire offensive side of the ball, working the O-line.
What a class that's shaping up right now. So when we speak, just generally speaking, 22 commitments, still room for a little bit more. What does Tennessee need to add before signing day?
I think they'd love to add another running back. USC commit DeJuan Morris is one that Tennessee continues to swing at. They'd love to get him on campus once the season begins, get him over here for a game, maybe an official visit this fall. We'll see what happens. He was supposed to come at the end of July. He ended up not coming that weekend. They're going to work to continue to get him over here for a game this fall. They'd love to add him potentially another linebacker in this class. You've got the one committed, but they'd love to add a second. They're going to continue to work, some different players. Will they continue to swing at Jaden Perlotti? And maybe committed to USC. They've continued to, William Lynn just continued to talk to Jaden Harmon, the young man that's committed to Alabama from Rome High School there in North Georgia. He was one that Tennessee had a lot of traction with before the linebacker coaching change when Brian Jean-Marie went to Michigan. William Lynn just kind of continued to work that one to see if Tennessee could potentially, get him over here for a visit. And then, defensive line, interior defensive line more than anything. Tennessee would love to add somebody on the interior of the defensive line, and we'll see if they're able to get that done once they start doing senior evals and continue to work some targets that they would like to flip.
Now with David Sanders on board, what can Tennessee fans expect when he steps on campus? Is he one of these guys that's going to be able to come in and compete day one for a starting job? I know, offensive line's a little bit different than coming in at wide receiver, running back. So what's the expectations on David Sanders when he arrives?
Well, anytime you're a highly rated kid, you're a top 10 player nationally, the number one offensive tackle in the country by the composite. Those expectations are there. I think they're there for him. I think they're there for the fans. No different than, when a Nico walks in or whoever. So, there's going to be somewhat pressure to, play right away. And so we'll see if he's able to get past some of these younger players who have been on campus for a year. Bennett Warren will have been on campus for a year. Jesse Perry will have been on campus for a year. and so on and so forth. Can he get past those players a year from now? Lance Hurd is probably going to be your locked-in left tackle for next year. Can David Sanders win that right tackle job to help kind of protect the front side for Nico Iamaleava?
Yeah. All right. High school ball about to start at the end of this week. Who are you watching on that Vols commit list to have a big senior year?
I really like Joakim Dodson. He made the move from out in Memphis to Chattanooga Baylor. Got a really good quarterback throwing him the ball down there with the Cherry Kid. So, in my opinion, I would go Joakim Dodson is one that's going to surprise and have a huge year statistically for a Baylor team that I think is probably the favorite to win D2 AAA in the state of Tennessee.
All right, Austin Price with VolQuest. What a weekend for Tennessee fans. Hopefully this bleeds into the season, and a big off season means a big season, so we'll see what happens. But Austin Price, thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop.
Appreciate you.
To unpack the latest on the recruiting trail out there in Norman, Oklahoma from Sooner Scoop, Josh McCuistion. Josh, David Sanders now off the board. A lot of eyes now going to Michael Fasusi. And even Texas folks have come on this very show and said, yeah, I kind of like where the Sooners stand. What are your thoughts overall on Oklahoma's chances to land him?
Yeah, and I'm very much in step with what I'm sure those Texas folks were saying, that 2 months ago, this didn't feel like Oklahoma. That didn't feel like the case. Really felt like Texas had done a great job kind of really from January to about June. Like that was kind of what you thought was happening. And if anybody was making a run, it felt like it was Texas A&M. That kind of felt like maybe that was going to be the secondary option where you kind of came down to his announcement where we stand now and say, okay, it's going to be one of the in-state schools. I really got the impression that when he made his official visit on June 14th, the second to last weekend, Oklahoma just really hit that out of the park. Now, I know at the same time they've done a lot with NIL. Michael Fasusi has been a priority target for them for 2 years now. So there was a lot that was poured into this in a lot of different ways. But my impression all along has been that Oklahoma really connected with his family. I think that was kind of where it started. I think Michael maybe warmed to Oklahoma as time went on. Like, I don't know that it was always the instant thing for him, but I think mom, dad, I think they really connected with OU and Brent Venables and his whole message. So, again, I like where Oklahoma is. We've seen this a few times where Oklahoma looked like they were right there, ready to close on one of these top 10 offensive tackles, and it just didn't quite happen for whatever reason with Ty Haywood, Lamont Rogers, some of these other guys. So Oklahoma's got to finish the race, but I do like where they sit right now.
What's the confidence? I don't want to put you on the spot here, though, Josh. If you had to put like a confidence level, not a pick per se, but a confidence level that five-star offensive tackle Michael Fasusi ends up giving a verbal to the Sooners, where would we put you at? Not holding you to it, but where would you put you at right now?
Sure. Well, it's perfect because, on Scoop, we do a weekly kind of commitment class predictions each Friday. So just a couple of days ago, I put in a 60% for Oklahoma, and that's about right for me. I think Texas is, 40%, and if you want to get into the infinite, then you're talking about A&M, maybe a small chance. But I really think it's Oklahoma or Texas. And again, I think Mike sees a real opportunity with OU. I mean, obviously, almost regardless of what Oklahoma's going to start at offensive tackle, it's a position he could come into and compete for pretty early heading into next season. So there's not that obvious young guy ahead of him that's going to be a real problem. They can sell him on the bookend idea of he and Ryan Foje together. I think that's something that does appeal to Mike. And you put Michael Fasusi with this class, and it's a really good offensive line group, and we all know what Bill Bedenbaugh's track record is with guys like Orlando Brown and Creed Humphrey and some of these great players that are now, making big paydays in the NFL. So I think that is all part of the pitch for him. And like I said, I think it's been multi-pronged, but Oklahoma's done a nice job kind of giving him the whole picture. And I think over time that's kind of won him over.
Outside of the offensive line, what would you say, like, hey, Oklahoma really needs to focus on this position or these couple positions going forward?
Yeah, if you're talking about 2025, it's really linebacker. I mean, Oklahoma has most of the hay in the barn at this point in time, to use a very Oklahoma colloquialism there. But, we'll go with that. But really the guy they're focusing on is Christian Jones, the linebacker from Omaha, Nebraska. This is a guy that was a target before Zach Alley took the defensive coordinator linebacker's job at Oklahoma. But as time has gone on, he really emerged as kind of their guy. That's really the player they wanted. They only have one player currently committed, an in-state guy, Marcus James. Clearly, they'd like to add another. This was never going to be a big linebacker class, but I think they'd like it to be a couple, and then maybe next year is a little bit bigger group. But, in 2025, like I said, if Oklahoma closes on Fasusi and then they can finish with Christian Jones, who's set to announce, a few weeks into the regular season, they may be done in 2025. Like that's a real possibility. Now, maybe there's a late riser. Maybe they, somebody flips their commitment away from Oklahoma. You never know. But as things stand, it's a very real possibility that Oklahoma's entire class is going to be done by September 1st.
Well, let's stick with that idea of the hay being in the barn. For a committed Sooner right now that you're tracking to have a massive senior season, who would that be?
For a rankings perspective, I mentioned him earlier, and it's just for those that don't know, I'm based out of the Houston area, so I get to see this guy a lot. Ryan Foje, people forget that when he was offered by Oklahoma, they were his first offer. It was heading into his junior season. You don't see that for elite offensive tackle. So, for comparison, Michael Fasusi was offered roughly 7 months before that. So it's a very different scale, but he's just slowly risen up the rankings. And I know talking to guys like Cody Belair, they just love his athleticism, his length. He's starting to fill out his big frame. He's a guy that wouldn't shock me if, Charles Power, Cody, and the guys have some real 5-star decisions to make with him come, into the period and when you get into the All-Star game time of year.
Awesome. Well, Josh, we appreciate all your time, man, breaking it down for us. If you have not yet gotten a membership over at Sooner Scoop, Josh, Eddie Radosevich, the entire team over there is crushing all the coverage both on the recruiting trail and in relation to the team as we got college football about to be played here. Josh, thanks so much for your time, man.
Hey, always enjoy it, JD.
Florida, fresh off of a massive commitment from 4-star corner Ben Hanks. To check in on that and everything else going on out there in Gainesville, we got Gators Online's very own Keith Niebuhr. Keith, what went into this commitment for Florida landing Ben Hanks?
Well, first of all, they have a need at the position. Now, they've done pretty well at cornerback, especially during the transfer portal season where they picked up Cormani McClain and Jameer Grimsley as transfers. So those were significant, don't get me wrong, but you still have to build through high school recruiting, and Ben Hanks Jr. is one of the top prospects really in the state of Florida. And, if you're the University of Florida, JD, you shouldn't have to leave the state of Florida to find a good defensive back, right? And it just so happened that Ben Hanks not only is in the state of Florida, but he's also a Gators legacy. So it worked out perfectly. This is a guy that maybe a year ago you would have thought Miami's probably the team to beat. But Florida continued to chip away. He built a strong relationship with the new secondary coach, Will Harris. Ben made 2 visits to Gainesville in June, one for his official visit and another for an unofficial visit. During the official visit, he got that full experience and he really got to bond with the staff and other recruits. When he returned 2 weeks later for an unofficial visit, he got to see more about how the team operates on a day-to-day basis, watching them in organized team activities, better known as OTA. So he really got a true feel for the program. So in the end, he picked Florida not just because he was a legacy, but because he felt comfortable there. They had a need for him there. They made him feel like a priority, but also he felt at home in Gainesville, and I think that was significant too. So really, there were a lot of pieces to this puzzle beyond just the fact that he was a Gators legacy, JD.
You brought up something interesting, Keith, that I want to get some more of your thoughts on. With the conversation around Florida staff and Billy Napier, and I know people are split on that, how much do you think Florida will push towards signing day when it comes to getting some of these commitments? If they do have a season where they go out and win 7 games against that, is that kind of the strategy there, or where do you think?
Yeah, it is. The feeling that they feel internally, but as most programs do, hey, they're going to have a strong season. The question, JD, is how many wins? What's the win total that would get people's attention? Okay, 6-7 wins, you're certainly going to save your job, one would have to imagine. But then do you go into next season on the hot seat? Does it, is it, the problem with getting on the hot seat, and by the way, we don't know that Billy Napier's on the hot seat.
Sure.
He's only perceived to be on the hot seat. Mm-hmm. However, perception essentially is reality with recruits. But once you get on the hot seat or the perceived hot seat, it feels like you never get off of it, right?
Sure.
There's always that cloud hanging over your head. So what is the win total that would impress recruits? We think 8 or more probably would impress a lot of these guys, particularly given Florida's schedule, which includes 8 teams ranked in the Associated Press preseason top 25. You win 8 games or more against that schedule, and you're going to eliminate a lot of the question marks about your stability as a staff. But also, you're telling recruits, hey, you're on an upward trend. That's a good record against that schedule, a very good record against that schedule. You're doing things the right way. You're moving in the right direction. And we've had a lot of recruits say, hey, I'm going to keep an eye on this Florida team this season. I want to see what they do. I like this staff. I just want to know that they're going to be there. So it could lead to some dividends in that late part of the cycle. You know, how many guys could they flip? How many big name guys could they land? We don't know. But at that point, if you just land 3 or 4 more guys, it's going to really complete a class. It's not like you're going to flip a dozen guys. It's not going to happen. But 2 or 3 or 4 guys that maybe aren't looking like they're going to be part of the class today, are part of the class in December, then you've done a good job. Then you've put together another top 12, top 15 type of class. And again, that continues that upward trend for the program.
And if I'm making a case for Florida, if they do go out and win 7, 8 football games, using football math, you're like, hey, I know how this looks on paper, but like put us in the Big 12, see what our record is. Put us in the ACC and see what 7-5 against that schedule looks like in that conference. I think you probably find yourself in the conference title game. Neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, JD, last thing, I thought that a lot of kids, I've always said, hey, your record is your record, right? I mean, I get it that a schedule's tough and not tough, but to a recruit, your record is your record. But just in the last week, I've had multiple recruits say, hey, they're playing a tough schedule. So either they're following it closely or the Florida staff has hammered it into their head. Hey, they're playing a hard schedule, but they are paying attention to that. And I think that's a good thing. So if they look at an 8-4, 8-5, 7-5, they're realizing that would be maybe 9, 10 wins in another conference. And, you can't always assume recruits follow things as closely as fans and media people, but it seems like in this case, they might be.
Keith, we hit on the secondary a little bit. What's next for Florida, maybe outside of the defensive back position?
Well, look, right now, if you're looking at what area of the recruiting class is the strongest, I think you have to point to wide receiver. You've got 2 on 3 top 100 national recruits committed at the receiver position. One of them is Vernell Brown III, who is nearing a 5th star in the on 3 industry rankings, and the other is Joshua Moore, a 4-star recruit from Miami, who we also have, I think, number 57 in the country for on 3. So these are 2 elite players. Josh Moore, 6'4", Vernell Brown's in that 5'10.5", 5'11" range. Are different types of receivers. Florida would like to take 2 more receivers in this class if they can, and they're zeroing in on 4-star receiver Nashawn Montgomery of Miami Central. He's going to announce on August 25th. During that open week, that 1 week that wasn't dead in the middle of the summer where kids could recruit campuses, college campuses, Nashawn Montgomery visited Florida and only Florida, and he didn't just go there once, JD. He was in Gainesville twice in a 1-week span. Florida is trending big, and all signs point toward Nashawn Montgomery picking the Florida Gators on August 25th. That would give you 3 high-level receivers in this class to go along with your young quarterback who you signed last year, DJ Lagway. Sometimes people think that you're always going to get those receivers, elite receivers, in the same class with the elite quarterback, but oftentimes you get them the next year. They hear about them so much, then they get to see them a little bit either in spring practice, OTAs, or during games in the fall, and then they say, hey, I want to go play with that guy. And so I think that's what's happening because all 3 of these young men have mentioned a connection that they've built, 1 with DJ Lagway, and 2, they've seen with their own eyes at practice what all the hype is about. So Nashawn Montgomery would be the next guy to watch. He's an outstanding player, dominant in 7-on-7 season, and his coaches at Miami Central think that is going to translate in his first season at Central, I should point out. They think that's going to translate to the football field on Friday nights.
Yeah, I cannot wait to see what DJ Lagway looks like this year. Hoping he has some sort of role for the Gators this fall, but games are being played now, so it's going to be a blast. From Gators Online, the best in the business, Keith Niebuhr. Keith, thanks so much for your time, man.
Thanks, JD.
Well, you've made it to the end of today's video, but there's hundreds more videos on the On3 Recruits channel for you to check out. And also, while you're here, hit subscribe.